the 6th episode of Mindustry Schematics, where I walk through and explain different schematics to help you get a hands-on look at how Mindustry functions. And that also ties into software engineering, apparently. Today, we're not just going to be looking at one schematic like the lazy me would like to try to settle for. Oh no! Today we're going to be looking at multiple schematics. Even if it's like 8 in the end, there's still more to talk about, partly because I need the watch hours. Plus, it'll make for a more enjoyable experience. Alright, now that's the intro done. Just a reminder for what Surge Alloy is, in case you're not familiar. Surge Alloy is the mightiest and brightest of all the resources, and is very expensive to make. It can be used as ammo for certain turrets, but it's mostly just used for researching and building, because, seriously, who would have the bling to shoot with Surge Alloy often? Surge Alloy is made in these buildings called Surge Smelters, where you combine power, copper, lead, titanium, silicon, and a little bit of love, and Surge Alloy is made. This is not made quickly, or at least not as quickly as a seasoned Mindustry player would likely want. And because there are so many resources to keep track of, a schematic of a pre-made factory design makes even more sense than it normally would with others. First off, let's start with smaller stuff and work our way up to the big one. This schematic here is about the most compact Surge Factory schematic I could find, made by Homes with 4 underscores. I think I've spent far too long trying to figure out what those 4 underscores could be hiding, so I guess we'll never know. Anyways, let me explain how this thing works. So this vault here holds whatever resources are put into it, and these here unloaders, well, unload the stuff and put them into different surge smelters. And this track here gets the final product out. From the input perspective, it's kind of like having several surge smelters all with the same inputs. Which is kind of an odd thought, now that I say it. Moving up the evolutionary ladder. Now we're dealing with multiple inputs. Which sounds kind of stupid to say like that, but earlier there wasn't any attention to put into separating the individual resources and, that they go into specific tracks. But now there is. So let's start with, they're all by the same person. I have no idea how to pronounce their name though. Well, the closer we are to danger, the further we are from harm. A Triahiminary Stackable Surge Factory. I'll roll with that. All of the 4 elements have their own tracks in this schematic. This uses plastinium conveyors, which turn any incoming resource into a little bundle of 10 of only that resource, which can be drawn from with an unloader. This schematic uses that to have even distribution to the surge smelters. The copper comes in through this unloader here, lead and titanium come in through these unloaders and then bridges, and silicon, right down here, is close enough that it doesn't need a bridge. So it just comes in through an unloader. The surge smelter outputs with this bridge here because it doesn't need an unloader, since it's pretty eager to get the resources out anyway. And it has a power node right here so that you can keep the chain going without having to have an external pylon. I named this section broccoli because it kind of reminds me of it if you look at it hard enough. This is the only schematic in this section because I couldn't, and didn't want to, find anything else. This one schematic is made by Shotgun One Lava. Nice name. This goes off on a tried and true method of supplying the broccoli head, vaults and unloaders. The resources come in and then are unloaded into the surge smelters. You may remember this being used with the first schematic in the video. Copper comes in through here, lead through here, titanium through here, and then my boy silicon through here. Also, I found a fish rock. It looks remarkably like a fish. Witness its beauty. Anyways, when I was originally writing this part of the video, I thought it was heavily bottlenecked. Meaning that there was too many surge smelters and not enough space to get all the resources through. At least all the resources that it requires. Since then, I have learned from my ways, and I have learned it is bottlenecked. Just not as much as I thought. If all the resources are coming in, full blast, then the surge smelters will actually be very close to running at full speed. Considering the small space, it's actually rather well done. Good job, Shotgun One Lava. Shit, I could actually go for some broccoli right now. And now we move on to the big one. Okay, this part of the script is titled The Big One. You wanna know why? Because this part is the highlight of the video. Because this part is about this gargantuan schematic made by one Echoing Distraction. Anyways, this is a pretty big schematic, so I'm going to divide it up into parts. There's the spore production and refining, as well as the pulverization for the silicon. There are the melters and separators, and there are the smart vaults and unloaders. To start, spore pods. The water comes in from some source outside of the schematic, but you can really do anything here. The water allows the spore pods to be made, and they travel down this line here into the spore press, which, as you can imagine from the name, press the spore pods into oil. That oil travels through this conduit here and into these coal centrifuges. Turning bridge opacity down to 0 makes this little junction here a lot less intimidating. The coal then travels down the line into this really interestingly designed router chain, with the routers replaced with underflow gates, for some reason. To scrap the sand part of this, the scrap comes through these bridges, and then goes on an alternating chain of overflow and underflow gates to eventually arrive into these polarizers. And bam! That's the silicon done. Moving on to the next part, the melters and separators. It actually isn't that complex when you look at it. The only difference from the previous times in the video that has showed up is that there's a liquid tank here. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing. Scrap turns into slag, and slag turns into everything required that isn't silicon. The real complex part of this are these logic processors and vaults. To put it simply, all of these logic processors make sure that there are no overflows and that graphite can go die. In all seriousness, I'm not going to be able to illustrate much more than that without posting this video before New Year's. Anyways, quick note here. I still have no idea why Anukid's purple Serpulo echoing distraction decided to use underflow gates instead of routers. I guess they wanted to make sure that it filled up a bit like an hourglass, which makes sense now that I think about it. But I guess there really isn't much of a difference in the long term. The silicon smelters are still all filled up in a timely manner. Either way, the final stats. This bad boy runs on an average 2.4 surge alloy a second at full blast, with an input requirement of, drumroll please, 88 scrap per second. Technically it doesn't need that much, that's just the most scrap it can take on input, but still, it's definitely close to the actual number-ish. If anyone in the comments is willing to run the calculations, please share. It would really help. Alright, well, that's the end of the video. Hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something new. I'm supposed to say my name, but, yeah, it's the end of the video. See ya.